You know, we read the shorter version of the second reading, but not for the sake of cowardice. You know, I'm always willing to put my foot in my mouth. That second part was, wives, be subordinate to your husbands as is proper in the Lord. Well, at that point, the husband always jabs the wife in the ribs and doesn't listen to the next part. Husbands, love your wives and avoid any bitterness toward them. Then it goes on, children, obey your parents. This is pleasing to the Lord. And then they jab the kids in the ribs, but they don't listen to the next line. Fathers or parents, do not provoke your children, that they may not become discouraged. You see, the vision is a mutuality. In the ancient world, the idea of a husband loving his wife would be, why? Like a woman is a kitchen appliance that can have children. They were not love marriages. They were arranged, and therefore wives had very little power outside the house, but inside the house they ruled with an iron rod. St. Paul is saying husbands and wives should be best friends, and that is to fulfill the commandment. But we didn't read that part, but I wanted to assure you it wasn't out of cowardice. People get a little politically correct when they get to those readings about wives. What I really want to talk about today, of course, is family, because this is the feast of the Holy Family. And you, I'm sure, all have heard the old fairy tale about the enchanted frog prince. You know that the princess kisses the frog who has been cursed by the evil witch, and when the princess kisses the frog, he turns into a handsome prince. Well, the sequel to that is, after the wedding, he turns back into a frog. The ladies are laughing, at least. We got a problem here. There's nobody you can marry who is not an original sinner. And when we are young and in love and blind and dumb as a bag of doorknobs, we think, oh gosh, she's perfect. Oh, he's perfect. And then after a couple months, you realize he's never going to put the cap back on the toothpaste. She is always going to turn down the air conditioner and up the heat. And you realize that this is going to be more challenging than you thought. Well, it is very important for us to realize that it is idolatry to expect divinity from a human being. Perfection only comes from God. That's very important. We expect our kids to be perfect. Well, I never did that when I was young. Oh yeah? Let me talk to your parents and see if you did. We expect our parents to be perfect. It's a horrible day when we find out our parents are not all-knowing and all-powerful. We tend to treat those people who are nearest and dearest to us as badly as we would treat ourselves. We can be pretty hard on ourselves. I'm my own worst critic. I'm sure you're your own worst critic. And we forget that our spouse, our children, they're not other us's. That line in the scripture, two becoming one. That's not what the text says. It's two in one flesh. That sounds pretty uncomfortable. You have two separate large apartments and then move into one small one. It's two becoming one flesh. Not a lot of room. Marriage and family life are sort of the battlefield where, St. Paul says in his letter to the Ephesians, it's not against flesh and blood we war. We're in a spiritual warfare, but the battleground is often family life. And we forget that God has given us these people in our lives as opportunities to practice charity and kindness, heartfelt compassion, humility, gentleness, and patience. Bear with one another, forgiving one another. God has given you to each other as husband and wife, mother, father, family, brothers and sisters, to give you an opportunity to become like Christ. Now, we are told in the book of Deuteronomy that we are to honor our parents. Not simply obey. The commandment is not to obey. It is to obey, but more it is to honor. And St. Paul points out that this is the only commandment that comes with a blessing. Honor your mother and your father that it might go well with you in the land that you will inherit. So we all want our kids to do well. Last week I talked about material prosperity and that sort of thing. But on the other hand, it's not such a bad thing to do well. You want your kids to do well. Why not? Couldn't hurt. Money is not a bad thing if you use it wisely. You want your kids to be comfortable. And so what do? You nag them and nag them and nag them and point out when they get a B, it could have been an A.